Welcome to the Cities Are for Living podcast, an official podcast of the International Project Management Association. Join hosts Dr. Beverly Passian from the Netherlands and Peter Ahmad from South Africa as they explore this world of smart and livable cities. Through the stories and perspectives shared by project managers across the globe, each episode seeks to offer valuable insights, practical advice, and engaging discussions on the latest best practices in the project management field. The Cities Are for Living podcast is for project managers, built environment professionals, and community groups interested in expanding a community of practice, maximizing the impacts of projects across the globe, and enhancing the quality of life for all citizens. Welcome back to our latest Cities Are for Living podcast, where we head back stateside to the southwest of the capital, Washington, D.C., to Charlottesville. Here we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Alexia Nalewaik, a renowned expert in project governance, cost engineering and performance management. We delve into Dr. Alexia's fascinating career journey from an aspiring Shakespeare scholar to leading projects like the Panama Canal and the California High-Speed Rail. We'll discuss the critical role of project management in smart cities, the challenges of integrating modern technology into historic buildings, and the importance of ethics and interdisciplinary education in the built environment sector. With over 30 years of experience in corporate, project control, quantity surveying, and project management roles across the globe, Dr. Alexia currently finds herself as a lecturer at the University of Virginia, Charlottesville, where she teaches qualitative analysis and quantitative analytics, with a keen emphasis on smart cities and smart heritage. And the smart heritage angle in particular was a new one for me. It was really interesting to learn how quickly this particular theme has taken off in a relatively short period of time stateside. Join us as we explore the ever-evolving landscape of smart cities. We share personal anecdotes from across the globe and reflect on the impact of our work for the future of our cities. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just curious about the world of smart cities, this episode is packed with insights and inspiration. Regrettably, we didn't have the time to get into other fascinating backstories as an Olympic torchbearer or as a roller derby official, but that just means we'll have to engage a second time around. And based on Alexia's rich perspectives and the innovative thinking that she shares in the episode, that certainly can't come soon enough. Hope you'll enjoy this episode. So, it's just gone 3:45 in the afternoon here in Cape Town on the 9th of September, the year flying by as always. And I'm joined for, I think, the second, third, maybe the fourth time in the last couple of weeks with my co-host, Beverly Passian. Bev, how are you doing there in Utrecht? What's news your side?
Hello. Hopefully coming to you very clearly with my microphone in the proper place and the gain thing and the dial in the right location, and so I'm good. If that's working well, then I'm fine. Thank you.
Well, it's always good to have you with us, Bev, and looking
Absolutely.
forward to this conversation because I know it's another of the colleagues that you've been working closely with across borders, across time zones, all that fun stuff that we talk about. And welcoming you in from Virginia side, if I understood correctly, just outside the Washington, D.C. Absolutely delighted to be welcoming our guest this evening, Dr. Alexia Nalewaik. Welcome. How are you keeping this afternoon, or in your case, this morning?
I'm keeping well. I think I'm a little bit jealous of Bev's new tech.
You should be. She's the real deal, right? If only our listeners could see this, you know?
People have commented on this from many countries, and I don't know why. It's just a microphone, which, Peter, you told me to buy. And I don't know, it just sits here and it has dials and things and a red lit button that I'm not entirely sure I understand. So it just does its thing. What you should be really impressed with is the state of my paint by numbers.
Oh, I see. We can see this now. For the benefit of listeners who can only but see, there's a whole mountainscape going on there. Is that Canada or is that closer to home?
It's the closest thing to a Canadian landscape that I could find. So for my purposes, it's a Canadian forest environment. I can just recommend so strongly the Zen-like headspace that you get into with paint by numbers. Can't recommend it highly enough. It's so nice.
I think between the two of you on this call, I think there's about 5 different doctorates flying around, and here we are. Paint by numbers. What can I say, you know?
I highly recommend it. It's very, very nice.
I'd say also jigsaw puzzles.
Hey, I can definitely go with the jigsaw puzzles. We've got a few 5,000 pieces here in home here. Those are specials. Specials.
I rank my success in the jigsaw puzzle by how many pieces I have lost to the dogs.
Another factor that unites the three of us today. 4-legged fur creatures.
It's true.
Okay, are we going to move it on? Are we going to move it on?
I'm curious. Between the three of us, how many? I'm genuinely curious now. Between the three of us, how many animals do we have? I just have one, sadly.
I have 2.
I can add 3 to that. Three felines.
How do you protect jigsaw puzzles from cats? Do they just rearrange things on the table?
My wife has a very particular bark. That's all I can say. She's a quantity surveyor, so when she barks, it's worth listening to, you know? And the cats typically listen.
So she's a QS like me.
There we go. Cost accountant, all these fancy terms, but a QS indeed. I thought I had to drop that in somehow into the conversation. Let's move it on, Alexia. It's genuinely fantastic. I know we've been looking forward to this conversation for a good couple of weeks now. But maybe we should start before we get into your career and what set you off on your career 3 decades ago, if I'm not mistaken. Bev, the two of you met through the IPMA. Tell us a bit about how the two of you came to meet.
We met, I think it was in Rotterdam 13 years ago.
I would believe that, yes.
And we were standing over a food table in a break, and we didn't know who each other was. And we just started chatting and carrying on. And, you know, I'm based here in the Netherlands, and you're from the States. And we just really connected. And then we introduced ourselves. Oh, I've been meaning to contact you.
I'd read about you or something, or read something you published. And but you know what? I think at conferences, you know immediately when you've met sort of a kindred spirit.
Completely. Absolutely. And it might be for one project, or it might be for decades. It's meaningful no matter what. And thankfully ours is now into its 2nd decade. So I'm grateful for that coffee break 13 years ago.
Yep.
Alexia, tell us a bit about this background of yours. It's an incredible journey you've been on. You have multiple specialist fields, particularly in and around the project governance, cost engineering, and performance management. But I mean, these things take time to shape. Take us right back to the beginning and where your interest in the project management discipline started from.
So believe it or not, I actually wanted to be a Shakespeare scholar. But my father told me I would probably starve to death. And so
Really?
I was told that I should study any of the major sciences or maths. So my first degree was in physics. Halfway through my degree, my advisor, the head of the department, told me that he believed I was actually an engineer. And so he gave me the advice to move forward. He said he noted that I liked architecture, and he said if I put architecture and physics in a blender, that I would get structural engineering as a master's degree. And we had a major earthquake in California, so I had an opportunity to work with a professor estimating the cost of repairs to various damaged buildings. And that put me on a track into project controls, quantity surveying, and ultimately management consulting, project management.
Fascinating. So actually the career born out of a tragedy, and you talk about the earthquake, but it gave you, no doubt, an amazing experience and foundation and scale to deal with right from the get-go, right?
Yes, and amazing advice and opportunities provided by professors. So Dr. Richard Olenek at University of Dallas, he was head of the physics department, and Hank Kaufman also at University of Southern California, who asked for my assistance in estimating.
The thing that grabbed me last night preparing for this conversation was the way that you have built your professional career. You've had a lot of time spent in the academic space as well. And then this almost transition into a professional leadership role where you're wearing multiple hats, different societies and so forth. Tell us a bit about the ability to transition, because you can be really good in a technical way. But in order to actually lead in a particular space and to be able to convey ideas, it's not for everybody. It takes a particular unique set of skills, soft skills as well as the hard skills. That been your experience through this transitions in your career?
Absolutely, yes. And a big learning curve when I jumped from field to field or discipline to discipline. But I think a hallmark of it is that when opportunities come along, I tend to take them. It's a sort of, ooh, that's shiny. Let's try that. I could always go back to what I was doing before. Sometimes I do end up coming full circle, but sometimes I don't. I remember getting a phone call from Deloitte asking me if I would come in for an interview. And I think I hung up on them once. I asked them how they got my unlisted number. I pushed back and I said, there must have been some massive, this was back in the time of, oh my God, I'm old, fax machines. And I told them there must have been some massive fax machine error with an accountant's resume attached to my name. I don't know how. And I really fought them on going in to interview, but they dragged me in kicking and screaming. And boy, that was a huge learning curve, but it put me on this amazing path to doing all kinds of different things. And huge clients. Huge.
I think it would be a lovely blog associated with this podcast for us to look at the self-descriptions offered by our guests, because there is this common theme of adventure and risk-taking and the complete absence of any regret for taking the road not traveled. And I do think there is a strong relationship between that character made up of that collection of qualities and an appreciation of a multi-layered perspective of what it means to live in a smart city, one that promotes quality of life over the tech or the shiny things, as you mentioned. So I think I'll do a nerdy qualitative analysis of the transcripts and see what I can come up with for a composite personality of our guests. That'd be funny.
I think you touched on this in our last interview with Tika, where you were saying that if you had to describe the ideal project manager for a smart city operator, that his description was very apt. But then when we hear about Alexia's, it's no less apt. And again, the idea of running towards something that might be dangerous, might be challenging, but nevertheless pays off. That's one of the lessons that does come across in all these conversations that we're having. But I mean, Alexia, in the period that you've been working, I mean, we've seen so many shifts and disruptions in technology. Beverly set this podcast up and the series through the IPMA to talk about smart cities and how we can talk about all that fun stuff and advances, but if it's not hooked into the communities we serve in the projects that we do, we run a high risk of it being obsolete or a great amount of resources spent, but not fitting the purpose that it was designed for. Do you want to tell us a bit about what you've been forced to think about in terms of the disruptions, in terms of the trends that are out there, and how you've sort of adapted your own core research areas to those trends and where we need to do more? Yeah, I'd love to hear how you've thought about some of these things.
A lot of my research areas of interest have occurred as a result of the projects that I've worked on. I've had major projects like the Panama Canal and California high-speed rail, also just huge education districts, both K through 12 and university or community college level. And then also assisted with a merger of a major casino entities, and then worked on some of those huge casino projects in Las Vegas. And so looking at that, I've experienced a number of very different organizational structures and very different types of internal and external stakeholders. But one thing that became really clear to me was the ever-changing nature of risk. I was lucky. I was very fortunate that I'll say early in my career, which I'm counting as 10 years in, I was able to join a consulting firm that had a division that specialized in construction audit or project audit. And that gave me access. I think in many of our roles, we're sort of in a box, right? There's a certain amount that we're allowed to see, a certain amount that we have control over. But as an auditor, I was given 100% access to the client, and I could ask anybody for information. And if they refused, I could seize their computer. And I never needed to, but it was nice to have that level of access. And of course, to me, that just meant, more data. I could give me all the data. I want to see all the data from every department, every level of the organization. And so I learned so much doing that. I will say that in terms of the evolution of projects and technology, I've seen more technology on the audit side. We're able now to audit 100% of the data instead of doing sampling or selection of data and assuming that it represents the whole. I've seen a fair bit of much increased use of technology out in the field in construction, also data analytics and reporting. But really, what that's doing is it's freeing up the humans on the team to focus on smart management and focus on stakeholders, really engage critical thinking and address the problems instead of just trying to chase the data and trying to crank out reports. Really, we have now the free time to really understand what's driving the issues.
I think one of the things that we used to talk about in my experience in the metropolitan planning divisions in Cape Town and Johannesburg was this idea of you can have all the data that in the world, and particularly in that period where big data, particularly within municipal spaces, was becoming a thing, and you're dealing with spatial analysis and GIS and all this fun stuff that I was involved in. It's often about the questions that you're seeking to answer, and then ultimately tailoring the data to answer the question and being clear on what are we trying to aim for here, as opposed to, as you say, going down a rabbit hole. How important do you think that initial stage of any process of really trying to clarify the problem statement and get to the line of inquiry is? We've talked about shiny things and the desire in all of us to run towards it, but sometimes that ability to be able to take a step back and see what's really important in terms of that problem statement. Is there a lesson in that, do you think, Alexia?
I think the investment in planning at the start of a project is really quite important. Really knowing your stakeholders, really also recognizing that one of the common causes of a disconnect in a project is the people themselves. It's optimism and realizing that the team really isn't that objective. If they're on the project, they're embedded in it.
Your experience that embeddedness can be almost blinding to the environment around them. I ask because one of the concerns I have in the smart city space are professionals who are so committed to their unique technical role that they forget that they're citizens at the end of the day, that they forget that they're going to be affected or their family is going to be affected as citizens by the project decisions that they're going to make during the course of a city hall meeting or some kind of planning session. So in your experience, has that, as I say, that embeddedness been a hindrance or something else?
I'm not sure it's a hindrance, but I do wonder what happens when they go home at the end of the day and their wife says, "What the heck did you decide?"
Yeah. And it's those conversations that I think this podcast and future work within the quality of life field that will make those conversations easier, or at least less striking in their difference between the project manager at the office and the project manager at the dining room table.
Again, the research on understanding what you've been involved in. One of the terms that came up was smart heritage. So I'd be interested to understand the concept of smart heritage within the nature of these debates and discussions, smart cities and so forth.
Our conversation around smart cities very often focuses on what I would call a greenfield build, where you're starting from scratch and sort of the sky's the limit. You have all the fun tools.
Sorry, I'm forgive me, I have to interrupt. For those listeners, including myself, who don't understand what a greenfield build is, can you just quickly explain? Sorry.
I think this is where you and I have the upper hand on Bev. We enjoy this moment.
Sorry.
So the difference between greenfield and brownfield is that a greenfield, at least in recent times, has not been previously built on. So with a brownfield, you might have demolition or hazardous waste or something, but a greenfield is sort of a nice, clean slate. It might still be hilly and need grading, and it might need some natural remediation, and you still might find evidence of previous occupants in centuries past. I don't think any greenfield is truly green, but it's simpler and it's more unbuilt than a brownfield. I think the smart cities discussion really very often assumes sort of the ideal, the greenfield. And the fact of the matter is that most of the time, we are busy trying to retrofit existing buildings to accommodate the tech. And there are massive obstacles to that. In this context, actually, I'm considering smart cities or smart tech to be not just the tech, but also the choices that are made in terms of management and quality of life. And so if I look at existing buildings, I need to consider, and also I'm considering smart tech to be really just the next generation of building systems. So whereas we saw piping evolve from wood to lead to iron to copper to PVC, and we've seen electrical or let's just say lighting go from daylight to candles to, what have you. I really think that very often we miss the conversation around obsolescence and abandoning technology in place and the cost of replacing various technology. I think obsolescence of older technologies is very important. And also, I think technology is moving so quickly in the smart cities arena that obsolescence is a very important conversation to have.
I want to challenge you just a bit on the notion of obsolescence. How many professionals assume obsolescence and don't even consider working with what's already there? Yes, we all want a green field, but the brownfield still has life potentially, to keep the metaphor going on an idea that I just learned. It's necessary, I think, to work with what you have, no?
And I think that's important. If you look especially at older buildings, the ones that might be heritage listed, anything over 50 years and even several hundreds of years, you're going to encounter all sorts of challenges. I'm occasionally on grounds at the University of Virginia, which is a UNESCO heritage site constructed by Thomas Jefferson. I took my students on a tour below ground and in basements and underneath the lawn, which is a very, very famous part of the grounds, to really take a look at how much space, or rather how little space, is available for upgrades in utilities and technology, how much has been abandoned in place. And if we intend to keep upgrading, at some point we're going to need to remove all that stuff that was abandoned in place. Chatting with historic preservation experts about the difficulties of running Wi-Fi in a building that has several foot thick masonry walls, or the challenges inherent in trying to maintain a historic or heritage look without running telephone lines around the exterior of the building. These sorts of challenges, the further we get with smart technology and smart cities, the more we're going to need to have these conversations about older buildings and the challenges that you experience, and also the opportunities that you have to bring these buildings into being living, usable buildings instead of turning older buildings into just museums.
Just to take this example to another dimension, what we're seeing here in South Africa, and it's not untypical of other African countries, is this desire to build the greenfield smart city that Alexia is describing, with grand visions of a Dubai or Doha skyline with shiny buildings and green tech and the fourth industrial revolution. All of these things are in presidential speeches here in South Africa. It's an aspiration. At the same time, our existing central business districts across many of the metropolitan areas of South Africa are really struggling. The infrastructure has been not even abandoned, it's been overwhelmed and or under-managed, under-repaired. And so you've now got obsolescence as a real issue. At the same time, this clamor to try and do something new on the fringe of the city, where you can start from that clean slate, but at what cost, particularly when you've invested in your central business districts, billions, if not trillions, in our case, of rands, which now run the risk of being obsolete or abandoned. And yet there's still a huge population, typically the poorest of the communities, who are reliant on those areas because of proximity to jobs, networks, community networks, etc. So I think that could be something to really pick up on for another episode, but just wanted to explain a South African context. I think, Alexia, you've seen a lot of that in terms of the death of downtown cities and towns in the States, where you've seen retail shopping centers rip the heart out of some of the central business districts. And then, of course, retail through online purchases has then a threat to those very things that destroyed the CBDs in terms of these regional shopping centers. It's an ever-evolving, interesting and fascinating space. And that's why we have these podcasts, for example, to explore some of these themes. So thank you for indulging me.
There's this challenge of multiple owners. So you end up with Wi-Fi gaps and smart technology gaps because different owners are not talking to each other to create a seamless CBD. The number of things to talk about in terms of existing extant buildings that are trying to upgrade and stay meaningful, stay relevant. It's a nonstop conversation.
The stakeholder management issue that you're raising is first and foremost, I think, of importance to the citizens who live there. I also think it is necessary to have people at the table who can have conversations about these potential legacy projects that might have been overlooked in the rush toward tech. And how could these people be reached, or what appeal could be made to them to make sure or that they're brought to the table, or how could these projects be portrayed to these stakeholders to make sure that their perspective is heard?
I think there's a need for a focus on collaborative input when we're looking at development, when we're looking at stakeholders. The end users are a really important part of that team.
There's a project here in the Netherlands that I think is a good example of this, where it's called, I want to pronounce it correctly, it's called Groene Kerken. And it is this national project of addressing the built environment of churches, trying to repurpose them in ways that are meaningful to multiple stakeholders. And I think that's a really good example of where the legacy players and the current or potential users of that environment get together and have a rich conversation that allows them to reuse or repurpose, or however you want to describe it, a piece of property that was sacred at one point, but for whatever set of reasons needs to be thought about in a different way. And it would be a good example, I think, to include in not just this podcast, but certainly in a heritage management course, perhaps, that you bring to the Netherlands, Alexia.
Actually, one of my students took that exact topic on as their semester project last semester.
Really?
And they chose the chapel that's on grounds at UVA because Thomas Jefferson, I think many campuses usually put a church as the centerpiece of their campus. And Thomas Jefferson chose to put a library because the knowledge was more important to him than religion. As a result, we have a church or a chapel on grounds that is non-denominational, and it has cycled through different iterations with different religions, but now it's primarily used for concerts and weddings. And I agree with the student that it is underutilized and that it could be repurposed as a multifunctional space while maintaining its original purpose as well.
And hopefully not a sushi bar, for example.
No, that's across the street.
No, I'm forever reminded of this example in the northern part of this country where a church was, without thinking twice, abandoned in favor of a sushi restaurant. And so you're sitting in what had been a very sacred environment and eating sushi. Don't get me wrong, I like sushi just as much as the next person, but I think you take my point.
I would say that's arguably classier than the outcry in the 1980s over the church in London that became a McDonald's.
Yeah, okay, you win. You win.
You're trading burger patties for pieces of raw fish. Okay, let's move it on. A couple of pointers to think about the future, Alexia, if we may. What's one of the things you'd like to see changed? You've got this amazing wealth of experience. You've been within the academic space. What is it you think should be being adapted within the way that we teach these built environment skills and professional disciplines? You've mentioned just now ethics and the ethical framework, but what else in this world of AI where everyone is threatened with not having a job tomorrow, which I think is somewhat false, but then, hey, I'm at the wrong end of the career curve to really have an opinion on that. But yeah, I'd love to hear what your thoughts would be if you were resetting an agenda for the built environment disciplines now based on everything you've learned over the last couple of decades.
I'm seeing a definite effort on behalf of universities to break down the silos between departments. I think industry and discipline specialism are still very important and specialist skills, but also interdisciplinary exposure is, if you look at the sheer number of disciplines involved in smart cities, everything from graphic arts and industrial design to electrical engineering, just an incredible diversity of disciplines. I'm seeing universities start to focus on classes that are appropriate for multiple departments. Obviously data analysis is important. It's funny, when I was doing my structural degree, there were various computer programs coming out that were saying, oh, you could just input the numbers for your building and it will cough up the structural analysis. And I kept saying, but you need to know the maths. You need to know the data analysis so you know when the model is incorrect. So we can trust AI to a point, but we need to have those critical thinking skills and those math skills, statistical skills, to be able to say something's wrong with that output. You can't just blindly trust the tech, right? Actually, speaking of games, so I was just at one of the museums in New York, and there's a guy who has reimagined the Monopoly game to focus on philanthropy. It's really cool.
That's the coolest thing I've ever heard. That's great.
I can send you a link to that.
Please.
So the other thing that I'm seeing also is an effort to embed ethics education in every department and in teaching. But what I've seen in professional associations is that although they claim to have ethical standards, they are very, very reluctant to actually implement sanctions. And so they're generally ineffective. The other challenge is also that if you find yourself in a problematic situation at work, you often need to be in a particular position of privilege to be able to speak up and take the consequences. And that may
Completely.
mean losing your job and your income. So
Completely.
universities are trying to find a way to teach this. And they're also discovering that some of this comes from a moral code that occurs at a very early age. And university is really maybe a bit late to have that discussion. I've just had a chat with one of the departments at UVA, and I'll be helping build a section for the Online Ethics Center, which is hosted by UVA, specifically on ethics in the built environment. I'm really looking forward to playing with that and seeing what I can tease out of it that can be useful. I would say also never stop asking questions. Seize all the opportunities you can. I will say bored, Alexia, is a very bad thing. So there's a lot to be said for constantly making a nuisance of yourself and just first asking a lot of questions, talking to a lot of people, and then on occasion poking the bear just because it's fun.
I would like to ask you a question, but first bring you back to 5.5 years ago when we were in Dortmund at the first ETEMS conference, right? And we were 6 days away from lockdown. And it was you're laughing. It was the first time that you had delivered a lecture on heritage in smart cities. Do you remember? And there were 9 people in the room, including you and I.
Right.
And 5 years later, less than 5 years actually, because you started teaching this last calendar year. 5 years later, you're now teaching a course, master's level at a university. That to me is nothing, of course, but a success story. But that also tells me that the very human dimension of remembering our past and protecting it as part of a smart city conversation is absolutely the right thing to do.
We've seen so much amazing growth. Oh boy, do I remember that. In fact, I remember trying to decide whether or not to go to the conference because I knew COVID was occurring in Frankfurt was like the European hotspot at the time.
And Milan.
I had just questioned my father's choice to go to Australia on a cruise.
Yep.
And he said he enjoyed living, he enjoyed the cruise. COVID was no big deal. And I said, okay, so I should go to this conference. He said, absolutely. And then just as I got to the conference, like one day into the conference, I get this text message that says, "You're living dangerously, come home immediately." And I'm like, I'm in my 50s, right, Dad?
It was a valid, I think, concern given everything that happened afterwards.
Well,
and they chased us out of the buildings, remember? Our conference ended on the Saturday. They shut the doors behind us.
They shut Frankfurt Airport after my flight, and they shut Heathrow Airport after I went through there.
Yep. And it...
Is this all because of your Smart Heritage lecture?
I really don't know. I can tell you.
Thanks, but don't come back. Exactly.
When I went through Immigration and Customs, when I reached the U.S., they asked me if I had been in the Middle East or China. And I'm thinking, I've just come from the European hotspot, and you're not even asking me about it.
It was a spicy time. But I think there is a story. I know that there's a story to be told looking at Smart Heritage from 5 years ago to the course that you deliver now. You should really take a moment and pick up, your phone and dictate into your phone just that story. What happened? What were the conversations? What convincing, if any, needed to happen to get Virginia, on board with the course? It took 5 years, but you were absolutely right. As a topic that needs attention, you were absolutely right.
That course hit the fast track. It was a matter, believe it or not, of an introduction to the department via a friend who's a member of the team in roller derby.
I remember.
And
yeah.
It was a matter of an introduction to the head of school, and boom, it was fast tracked. So
I remember.
To give credit where it's due, I will say that the term Smart Heritage originally was defined by an art and cultural heritage national trust in India in 2007. And it was very specific to the Indian concepts of culture and heritage and just the wealth and breadth of old buildings that they have. And the use of the terminology has really taken off in the 20 years since.
As a bit of homework for myself, I'm going to look through my Smart City project collection and grab the projects that have the word heritage in them, and I'll send them your way. I don't think I've ever done that. That's terrible. I should have done that ages ago. I'll send that to you.
Okay, and I have a book arriving in the mail or in the post just published on cultural heritage, built environment, and religions. So it's a collection of essays. I think you're going to love it.
Yes, please.
Yes.
And here we are at the conclusion of the interview and the conversation. We haven't even got to the roller derby and the Olympic torch moment. There are so many more things to talk to you about, Alexia. But I think for now, you've given us so much to think about. You've given us a great title for the podcast, Poking the Bear. And you've given us the whole lowdown on that point that's been made here. I don't want to underplay it, that you took a fairly niche topic and it's now being turned into a whole study stream. And I think that in itself, if I understood correctly, that's within like 5 years or so.
Yep, 5 years.
Turned that around.
Yes.
That's a remarkable achievement. And again, it bears a lot more scrutiny of how you were able to put that on the radar. But you've given us an amazing scope and background to your life, your professional career. And I know, Beverly, before we sign off, you've got one last question.
Well, one last comment, really. One of the best insights I was offered as an emerging scholar, and this was during my first PhD, my supervisor said to me, "We're in the business of socializing ideas." That's it. There are no absolute truths in the social sciences. We are in the business of socializing ideas. And what Alexia did 5.5 years ago was exactly that. She put an idea out there to see if it had legs, and it did, and then some. So I think if we do nothing else in this podcast and in future episodes and any of the conversations that this network has, or ETEMS or the IPMA, special interest group, if it seems like an outlandish idea, grab it anyway, because you have no idea where it's going to end up.
A lot of research is done in areas where people have done research before, and it takes a certain amount of bravery to say, I have this new idea and I'd like to see what people think of it. And I did that with our performance audit model, and I've done that with the smart heritage concept. Really,
you're so clever. You're so
send
clever.
it out there and see who bites. And if nobody bites,
Exactly.
But it's funny because I never know when I publish something what's going to hit a nerve and suddenly become incredibly popular. And certain things I think are genius just sort of hit the floor and stay there. And other things, suddenly somebody picks up and runs with it. And I'm like, wow, somebody likes it.
As much as we enjoy, the three of us, but I'm thinking, we as academics love getting books out there. That's very nice. It's the socializing of ideas through these new channels like podcasts and the other forms of digital media that might help us even better tell these stories.
And I'm updating that performance audit book right now, second edition.
Excellent.
Adding quality of life, sustainability, resilience, and benefits.
Where'd you hear that?
Sounds like your type of lingo and lexicon there.
Came from Bev, absolutely.
Well, there we go. We're going to leave it there, Alexia. But again, all that remains from our side is to really thank you so much for your time, for your insights, for the willingness to share an amazing journey. And I've no doubt, like almost every interview, we conclude by saying, let's hope this is not the first and last time. I'm hoping we can come back and have a conversation. Hope you've enjoyed it and hope you've had a chance to go down memory lane. But Bev, last word to you.
The last 2 words. Thank you. Thank you, Alexia, for 13 years ago at the coffee stand. And thank you for taking a risk at ETEMS 5.5 years ago with your smart heritage idea. And thank you for always being available and generous.
Thank you for putting up with me and for being a great friend and inviting me to do cool stuff like this.
We look forward to seeing you soon, Alexia. Keep safe. Enjoy the rest of your day. Speak to you soon. Bev, next week, away we go.
Away we go.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Cities Are for Living podcast of the IPMA, the International Project Management Association. Please feel free to send us feedback, your thoughts on the content we provided, and if you'd like to get involved via sur@ipma.world. The SUR standing for Smarter Urban Rural, one of the task teams that's alluded to in one of our pilot episodes. So sur@ipma.world. We'd love to hear your feedback, and please get in contact. Tell us what you think.